implemented this ACME protocol. Bypass is one, and Zero SSL is another. Bypass doesn't actually offer wildcards. Zero SSL does, but if you go to their website, they have this pricing page that doesn't make it very obvious that it's unlimited, because they have a paid service that includes some web services on top of the ACME protocol, where a free account only gets you like 3 certs or something with their web services. But if you use ACME only through Zero SSL, it's unlimited, just like Let's Encrypt. And paid CAs like Sectigo, which formerly Komodo, and even internal CAs like Small Step and Nexus CM, for example, are also starting to incorporate the ACME protocol into their CA products. And so even if you're not getting a public cert, if you're getting an internal cert for your devices, like theoretically you might be able to use an ACME client like CertBot or Posh-ACME to get those internal certs and sort of use the same workflow to get certs as you would with public certs on the outside. So Let's Encrypt actually on their site has a page with a whole bunch of clients, including Posh-ACME. We just go documentation and client implementations. So they've got Bash clients and C clients and all sorts of clients. They've got libraries and things like that. All of these are clients that implement the ACME protocol. And Posh-ACME is one of the ones in the Windows IIS, even though technically Posh-ACME is cross-platform. It's just that's kind of how it got categorized on the site. So that's ACME. Posh-ACME is just a PowerShell script module. I released version 1 in April 2018, and we're currently on 4.5, so a little over 3 years old now. You can run it on Windows, PowerShell 5.1, as long as you've got .NET 4.7.1 or later, or any version of PowerShell Core. But if you want to run it on Linux or Mac, 6.2 or greater is recommended. It's on the gallery. Install a module Posh-ACME, and it mostly deals with DNS plugins. Like it's got this plugin system for the DNS challenges and HTTP challenges, but most of the plugins are DNS related, and there's over 50 plugins. I think there's like 56 technically right now. Available just native built into the module. And I'm always looking for new providers and new plugins and new recommendations for, hey, if you've got your provider that you use for DNS or your registrar, those can be more of a pain. Send me a pull request, place an issue on the repository, and I'll see if I can make it go. That's kind of I enjoy that a lot. I enjoy like looking at the API docs for these DNS providers and implementing a little REST client for their API in PowerShell. Posh-ACME specifically is a little bit different than some of the other clients that you might find in that it's only focused on obtaining the certs and not so much on the deploying of the certs. Like I kind of wanted to keep it very focused, very simple, because PowerShell itself is so powerful. You can sort of, automate your way around the deployment of, whatever you're getting the cert for. And I didn't want to limit people, right? I didn't want to put in something that would only be useful for a small set of use cases for the certs. But I have a separate module called Posh-ACME.deploy that has a handful of functions for, Windows-specific deployment tasks like setting a cert for IIS or terminal services, remote desktop gateway, or the FTP services or Exchange and things like that. So the thing with getting a public cert at all these days from any public CA, be it Let's Encrypt or Sectigo or any of them, is that obviously you need to own a real domain. You can't get a public cert for a .local or a .int or a .dev or any of those TLDs that don't actually exist or you don't actually own. And then you have to be able to prove that you own the domain either via a DNS text record that the provider will tell you to create, or hosting a file on a public-facing web server. The other caveat that a lot of people don't realize about public certs is that all of the CAs have to abide by this certificate transparency program these days, which means every cert that you get is logged in a publicly accessible history, basically, of certs issued. And so this certificate.transparency.dev kind of explains the deal with transparency in general. And this crt.sh is actually a site that indexes the logs. And so you can go to here and type in a domain like PowerShell.org and see the entire history of the certificates that have been issued to something within PowerShell.org. And you can see they've actually used a lot of Let's Encrypt for the past few years. But before that, they've got some Cloudflare certs in here, and they've got Komodo, ECC, so that's just FYI. If you are using a public CA to get internal certs for things that aren't necessarily sitting on the internet, the host names in that cert can be found by the general public. So just keep that in mind. Okay, no more slides. Let's do fun stuff. So I've got Posh-ACME installed here. I've got the latest version. I've actually got the latest version with a few commits that I actually made today as I was finding bugs as I was playing with my demos. And a copy of the Posh-ACME deploy module installed. So the primary function that does kind of everything, it's the whole ball of wax function, is called new PA certificate. And we've got two parameter sets. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I could get into, but before we sort of delve into the specifics and go for the gusto and get a certificate, I want to sort of take a step back and look at some of the lower level functions, so you kind of get a better understanding of what it means to use the ACME protocol, like how it works and what you're actually doing under the hood when you type new PA certificate and it does everything for you. So the first thing you need to do is obviously pick a CA to use. You need to pick a server, an ACME server, and you can do that with new PA server. Tab. Come on now. What is happening? Not new. It's not new PA server. I don't know my own module. It's set PA server. Okay, and Let's Encrypt in particular, and bypass, but not zero SSL, of the three sort of main public CAs that do ACME up front, has a production endpoint and a staging endpoint. And I highly, highly recommend that when you're first playing around with this, you start with the staging endpoint. And so there's a shortcut for LE stage. Oh, looks good on my end. Got questions? Okay. So we're going to set our server to the Let's Encrypt staging server. There's a whole bunch of shortcuts in here too that you can use. There's ones for bypass prod, bypass test, zero SSL prod, LE prod, and LE stage. But technically you can do any ACME compatible endpoint here. You can put in just a HTTPS, myca.com/ACME or whatever. They'll publish a ACME directory URL that you can use, and you can put that in there. So directory URL, LE stage, set PA server. So it's the first time you connect, it's going to give you a little terms of service link that you're supposed to review. We'll just say that we reviewed it. And the next thing you have to do is create an account. And there's no the beauty of the ACME protocol is that you don't have to, open a web page and create an account and give them your email address and create a password and, all that stuff and put in payment details and things like that, because it's all part of the API. And so we do new PA account. The only thing we have to do here is explicitly accept the TOS that we just got linked to, and then optionally put in our contact email address, which can be an array if you have multiple. And the only thing that Let's Encrypt does, I can't speak for the other CAs, but typically what they're supposed to be using your email address for is to send you expiration warnings, which is nice if you don't already have a way to monitor your certs and know when they're going to expire. So they'll start sending you expiration emails at like, I think 20 days, 10 days, 5 days, and like 1 day or something before your cert expires, assuming you haven't already renewed it. And so if you don't care about the expiration emails, you don't need to give them your email address. This is all you need. New PA account, accept TOS. And I throw a warning about the expirations. So now we've got an account, but what does that even mean? As far as the ACME protocol is concerned, all an account really is a key pair. It's a private key and a public key that you're using to sign all of the communication you do for the API. It's basically the crux of the ACME protocol is, the messages that you send to the ACME server are validated, are signed using your account's private key. And that's how they know that you're the one that is sending the messages and somebody can't, get a cert for your domain or whatever. By default, it defaults to this, elliptic curve, 256-bit key, but technically you can specify alternate key lengths if you want. That's probably too deep for this session, though. So we've got our account, and I have a domain on Cloudflare called Posh-ACME.win. Isn't that special? Oh, if what already exists? The account?
Yeah.
No, actually. If so, when you're creating the account this way without any other parameters, it's going to create a new private, randomly generated private key for that account. That's actually a good question. And so an ACME account is not actually that special, all things considered. Like, it's not like, your Google account that is supposed to be, the one thing that represents you as a person and you use everywhere across all the services. ACME accounts are kind of throwaway to a certain extent. Like if you've got, 5 different servers that need 5 different sets of certs, it's not uncommon to have a separate ACME account on each of those 5 servers. You don't want to be creating, tons all the time. You don't want to, like, if you're using this in Docker or whatever, you don't want to create an account like every 10 minutes because you're throwing away the container and you're not saving any of your state, because you'll get rate limited if you create too many accounts in 3 hours or something like that. There's a whole rate limits page on Let's Encrypt's site, and I'm sure there's similar rate limits on the other CAs as well. But they are kind of disposable. Like, it's not the end of the world if you lose your private key or your system crashes or you lose access to the account or whatever. You can just create a new one. It's no big deal. You might still get expiration warnings if the new account is not getting the same certs as the old account. But again, they're kind of disposable, so don't even worry about it. If you do have an existing account that you want to share on a different server, the new PA account actually has a key file parameter where you can basically export the key file from your old account and import it with the new account here. Or if you have another install from another client that has a key, you can use that here too, and you can sort of reuse accounts in that way if you need to. So we've got our account, and we've got our domain, and we want to get a cert for it. So we talked earlier about what we need to do to prove that we own the domain. And part of what the module does with all the plugins is makes it sort of, quote unquote, easy to validate the challenges that prove you own the domain. We're going to start with the HTTP challenges because they're like, it seems to be more common, even though I don't particularly prefer them because I don't like mixing my ACME validation services with my web services or just services in general, because certs can be used for things other than websites, right? Like you can use them, like we talked about earlier, for remote desktop or SQL Server or FTP or all these things that are not websites and not web services and not web APIs or whatever. So sometimes you don't have a web server handy on your device or whatever, and you can't do an HTTP challenge, or you don't want to expose your service to the internet. It's not even facing the internet. It's only for internally. You just want the cert. And so I prefer DNS challenges because, generally speaking, your DNS zone is already public facing. And so it's just a matter of getting the records there so that Let's Encrypt can validate them. And then you don't have to worry about, NAT rules and port forwarding and firewalls and, things like that for your website to validate via HTTP. This particular server is currently internet facing, and I've got a NAT rule that forwards on port 8080 here. I'm also listening on port 80 just so I can have a nice little local view of my site here without issues. That's Haley. That's my old dog. She died a while ago, but she's the best. So this is my website at poshacme.win. You can probably even get to it externally right now. And we're listening on port 8080, which is being forwarded from the internet on port 80. So with HTTP challenges, that's important. ACME, the HTTP challenge in the ACME protocol says we will only request the challenge from our validation servers on port 80 over HTTP. That doesn't mean you can't redirect incoming requests to somewhere else, to either a HTTPS site on 443 or even an HTTP site on a non-80 port. But it has to initiate, it's going to come in on port 80. So you can't necessarily get certs for something that is only listening on alternate ports with HTTP. So the other thing we need to figure out is what plugin we're going to use. So for HTTP in Posh-ACME today, there are only 2 HTTP plugins that exist. And if we go get PA plugin, well, we've got a whole list right there, for example, or for to start with. So we've got all of these DNS plugins, and way down here at the bottom, we've got the WebRoot plugin and the Web Self-Host plugin. So let's look at the WebRoot plugin. We've got get PA plugin, WebRoot, and we've got a params parameter that'll tell you what parameters the plugin can use, or what parameter sets the plugin can use. So in this case, it's got this WR path and WR exact path. But we're new. We haven't played with this before. We don't know what that even means. There's no description here. So you can use the guide parameter instead. And that will open up a link to the wiki with the usage guide for this plugin. And this is a whole nice little thing that I wrote up and tells you how to use the plugin and what the parameters do and how to use them. And so it looks like WR path is the WebRoot path. So this plugin is basically a plugin that simply copies the challenge files to a location on the file system. That's it. That's all it does. So it knows what needs to go in the file, and it needs to know what the file is going to be called. and you're just telling it where to copy the file. And so it assumes that you've already got a web server stood up listening on port 80, and you're just telling it where to put those files so that when somebody hits that URL, it will see the file that got published. And so in the example, it gives the sort of the default website in IIS, C inetpub www root, which we've got here with our index.html and our haleybeach.jpg. But where does it go? What happens when we do that? Let's test and figure it out and see what happens. So we need to use the publish challenge function. And we're going to give it a domain, Posh-ACME.win. We're going to give it an account, get a account. We're going to give it a plugin, webroot, and we're going to give it plugin args, which is plugin args, FYI, are just a normal PowerShell hash table with the parameters that apply to all of the plugins that you will be using for a given order. And so with this one, the only thing we technically need is WR path. But it is possible to use multiple different plugins with multiple different names. We can maybe go into that later. And so under the hood, it's just splatting this hash table to the functions in the plugin. So that's how that works. So we're just going to say WR path equals C inetpub www root. And we'll throw in verbose so we can see what's happening. And we're not actually getting a cert yet. This is just seeing how it works, making sure that it does work the way we think it does. Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. We need to tell it part of publishing a challenge is a token value. The token value is part of the protocol and returned. It's a unique value that the CA gives us when we submit a request for a new cert order. And so we're just going to give it a fake token. And fake for now, since we don't actually have an order with a real token in it, and it doesn't really matter. So that was very exciting. But what did it do? It created a .well-known folder with a Acme Challenge subfolder and a file called fake that, if we open it up, has our token value fake concatenated with this gobbledygook, which is essentially just the thumbprint for your account's public key. And it's basically a way for the CA to verify that your account, the account that requested the cert, is the one that's hosting this file. So if we go to our site and we go to .well-known Acme Challenge fake, we should be able to see the contents of that file. Oh, but we can't. What happened? Well, this is an IIS quirk in the default install where it doesn't serve any files that aren't in the my mappings, and particularly extensionless files. So it considers this fake a .fake file, I think, is or something what it does. Anyways, if you're running IIS and you run into this problem, all you need to do is go into IIS, go into your well-known folder, whoop, go into the MIME types, and add, oh, I can't do that, add a dot extension and make it, what is it, text plain? So the file name extension is dot, and the MIME type is text/plain. We say OK, and we refresh, and there's the contents of our file. So this is working internally. Technically, it is also working externally, or it should be, but you can't see my externals. But the point is, you should be able to publish a fake challenge and test it yourself before you actually try and get your cert. If you're not able to, open a web browser from a, internet-facing device and connect to your website and get that challenge result, then something is wrong and your cert order is not gonna work. So we are going to then get the cert now that we've verified that the publish works for the HTTP challenge. We're gonna go for it, and we're still on the staging server, right? Get PA server. Yes, we're on the staging server. Oh, this, by the way, is the directory URL for Let's Encrypt staging. So if we didn't have those, LE_stage shortcuts when we did the new PA server, you could have just entered this URL there as well. Okay, so getting back to new PA certificate. So what new PA certificate needs, most of all, is a domain array, one or more, contact, but only if you haven't already created an account. Pretty much everything else is optional. If we just do new PA certificate with our Posh-ACME.win, and let's add www as well, just by itself, it will default to this manual DNS plugin and basically say, hey, go create these text records and then get back to me. So you can do this without an actual API with your DNS. If you don't mind having to redo this every 90 days and go create some text records and wait. So cancel. Let's get rid of move PA order force. Okay. So in addition to the names, let's give it our plugin. Web root, same as what we did in our publish. Plugin args. Oh, I should probably have saved that to a variable. Whatever. UR path. Is that what it was? Can't remember. WR path. We got verbose in there, everything. Let's see if this works. Hope I didn't forget anything. Come on, let's encrypt. There we go. All right, yay, that worked. So we now have a cert for both of these names, Posh-ACME.win and www.posh-acme.win, and it has this thumbprint, and it's a RSA 2048-bit key, and it's good until August 30th, 2021. Now, if we want to see more details, let's do get PA certificate. We'll save that to a variable, and we'll format list. So you've got a lot of details here in addition to the stuff just in the default view. Most importantly, the path to all of the files related to this cert. Right now, it is not installed into the Windows Cert Store. So if we go, actually open up this from scratch in case people don't know. It's a shortcut for certlm.msc. Opens up the local computer's certificate store. And we go to personal, and there's nothing in here. So these files, the cert you have, only exists on the file system right now. And you can see it if we go to start cert file, and we can open up the file. And you can see we've got, it's issued to Posh-ACME.win from the staging artificial apricot R3. They've got a funny naming convention for their staging certificate authorities. And it's SHA-256 cert for RSA 2048. And it's got subject alternate names of Posh-ACME.win and www.posh-acme.win and a whole bunch of other cert details and stuff. And it's got this, fake staging certificate chain that is not trusted because it's staging, and you don't want to trust their, staging cert because that's not an officially trusted public CA. But it's a valid cert if you were to trust their root. There's no technical difference between a staging cert and a prod cert from a math perspective or a crypto perspective. It's all a matter of trust, right? It's the same deal with an internal CA. Like you can make your own internal CA and issue certs all day, but nobody else is going to trust it unless you tell them to trust your root first. So the other thing we can do, if we do get PA order, there's a folder property now on get PA order. Start get PA folder. So here is the directory with all of the files related to your cert order. And let's just sort of open this up and scroll. So we've got, this is the app data local folder in your current user's profile. And it's got a subfolder for the server, a subfolder for your account, and a subfolder for your order. And then within that order, you've got, the cert file itself, the private key, a PFX file that has both of those, the chain, we won't get into talking about chains because that's a whole other topic. But other combinations of chain and cert file that may be useful to you depending on what you're installing them into. There's also some, config stuff for the order itself, which is the order.json and plugin.args.json and the request and stuff like that. But that's sort of where everything lives, if you're ever wondering where it lives. Coincidentally, you can change the default config location of where it stores things. Like if you don't want it to be in your profile, if you want to put it somewhere else, there's a Posh-ACME home environment variable you can set. Just set that to a folder path wherever, and then re-import the module if it's already been imported. Otherwise, it won't recognize the new location. Just a tip. So we've got our cert, and that was all happy and it worked, and that's great. But what about, and that was HTTP. Oh, yeah, app data folder path. Yep. It was a design choice early on. Like I sort of modeled this originally after another very popular client called acme.sh, which their sort of claim to fame is that it's pure bash, or it's pure shell script. It's not technically bash. There's a difference, I'm told. I don't know really what the difference is. But it doesn't require any elevated permissions. And it lives in your user folder, and it just creates a subfolder off of your home directory. And so this is app data local is kind of the equivalent of your Windows home directory for app data, which this kind of is. Where was I going with this? Right. Okay. So that's the HTTP challenge. And that was not terribly exciting because HTTP is dumb. No, I kid. HTTP is fine. This whole thing works on HTTP. But I like DNS better. DNS is way more fun. So let's talk about DNS challenges. And let's do this. Since our domain is already on Cloudflare, we're going to figure out how to use the Cloudflare plugin. So get PA plugin, Cloudflare, params. We got multiple different parameter sets here that we can use. They're not that much different. They actually reflect a change over time in how Cloudflare had their API available. Originally, you had to use your login email and a global key that they would generate for you, and that basically gave there was only one permission level for your account. So if you had these credentials, you could do anything on that Cloudflare account. Since then, they have come with these limited scope bearer tokens where you can, set more granular permissions on your DNS zones. So you can, create a key that is only valid to edit, these 2 zones or whatever, and not, all of your Cloudflare, web workers and traffic monitors and, all that sort of stuff. So it's a lot more secure to use these bearer tokens. And then we've got a secure string bearer token or an insecure string bearer token, which is left over from a cross-platform issue I had in the early days running PowerShell 6.0 and 6.1 on Linux and Mac, and dealing with serialization of secure strings, and there was bugs and it was a pain, and I had to implement these insecure parameter sets, but now we don't need to anymore. So as of 6.2 and later, you can have no fear, use secure strings and PS credentials all you want, and it won't be a problem. So let's go to the guide. Anyways, so the guide actually also tells you, kind of how to set up your zones for those limited permissions, and it tells you about the global API key too. But this is the recommended solution for creating your API token, and then so we need to put our token in secure string value and add it to a hash table to pass to the plugin. So let's do that. Let me copy value here. I'm going to do CF token. Then we'll CF args, sure. CF token equals CF token. Okay, now to test it, we basically do the same thing we did before with publish challenge. Publish challenge. We'll use the same root domain. We'll use the same account. We'll use the same fake token. All we got to do, change the plugin, Cloudflare, and change our args to our hash table, which you pass as a regular variable, and you don't splat it here, just FYI, in case that was confusing before. So yeah, $sign variable if you're using variable, and don't splat it. And then we go. So it attempts to find the hosted zone, and it creates a record with another crazy value. The difference between DNS challenges and HTTP challenges is that the text records, so what it's doing under the hood, it's creating a DNS text record. And that DNS text record is _ACME challenge dot whatever the name is that you gave it. And so we can see, if we refresh this page, here is our value that we just set via the API. Easy peasy. I also had a fake one here for testing things earlier. And you can do this with any combination of subdomains you want. If you do www or sub.www, it'll just add the correct record automatically. So we've got our ACME challenge www sub and our ACME challenge, and they're all there, and it's all happy, and that's good. And if we want to get rid of it, we just unpublish challenge with the same arguments, and then no, come on now, there we go, unpublish this one, and they're gone. Oh, I forgot to show you. Let's republish one of them here. That one. So the other thing that you need to make sure of is that the record that was published, that it's actually resolvable. Like if you don't have an easy way to, check the DNS server that it got published to, like, this Cloudflare web interface or whatever, you can also just do a DNS query. I prefer Dig, which has a Windows version. If you weren't aware, you can download it from the, ISC website. You essentially download bind as a zip file, and it comes with a dig.exe that you can just run. You don't actually need to install bind. Just FYI, little tip. So you can use dig or NSLOOKUP with q equals txt for the record acme challenge.posh. Oh no, this is our sub one. Acme challenge www sub. And with NSLOOKUP, don't forget to add a trailing dot. It's a DNS thing. If you don't know it already, just remember, add a trailing dot to your NSLOOKUP DNS names. And we're going to do it. So the other thing to do is query specifically the Cloudflare authoritative name servers for the domain. So these are the DNS servers that are actually responsible for hosting, for giving the responses for our zone. And so we don't necessarily need to ask, Google 8888 or Quad 9 9999 or whatever. We want to specifically ask these because that is who Let's Encrypt and the Acme server validation servers are going to be asking specifically. They don't deal with cached results. It doesn't matter what the TTL is on your record. So don't worry about those sorts of things. ava.ns.cloudflare.org. Is it org? Com. So there's our result in the text response. And NSLOOKUP is just ugly. So here's the dig equivalent. Dig text Acme challenge sub posh-acme.win. You don't need the trailing dot, but it doesn't hurt. And then at ava.ns.cloudflare.com. I got to quote that because Posh thinks the at is a splat, which is a lot more verbose, and you can actually see the the DNS protocol. And DNS is cool. I like DNS. So here's our answer. And here's our TTL, our text record, and our value. And if we had multiple of them, let's do another publish. Reran our dig. This time we'll do plus short. Now we've got two responses because we have two records. A2 and whatever that is, IIFCX. So make sure that you can resolve your text record after you publish it. It's the same thing as checking your HTTP challenge after you publish that. Because if you can't resolve it, then the Acme server won't be able to either, and your cert order is going to fail. Is there a question? Let's see, resolve. Oh, don't get me started on a resolve DNS name. I dislike the output of that function a whole lot. I actually, side topic, I actually wrote another PowerShell module, DNS client. Nope, not that. What I call it. There's a module. Here it is. DNS client PS. It uses the DNS client.net .net library under the hood, and I like it much better. Anyways, tangent. How is the module getting access to DNS? Oh, yes. The creds we set up in a hash table for the plugins. So we've got this CF-args hash table that has a CF token value with a secure string that's our API key from the Cloudflare website. And that was, we posted that here, plugin args, CF-args there. Okay, so that works, our publish works generally speaking. So let's unpublish our fake 2 and unpublish our fake 1. And let's go get a cert. Let's get a wildcard cert because that's fun. Let's go back to our new PA certificate. We'll still use Posh-ACME.win, but this time we're going to do star.posh-acme.win instead. In addition, we're going to use there and CF args, and verbosa's in there, and so with DNS plugins, by default, new PA certificate is going to sleep for 2 minutes after it publishes the records, because on average, DNS providers take about that long to propagate the changes to their authoritative name servers. Some DNS providers are way faster. Some of them are way slower. Like we've had people posting in the community forums about DNS providers taking like hours to propagate DNS records before, which in my mind is enough to say, bye-bye to that DNS provider. But you should test basically with the same way you were, running a query against the record that you published. You should test that it is available within a reasonable time frame, or how long it does take to actually propagate for your provider. Cloudflare is super quick. We were talking about this earlier. So I'm actually going to lower the DNS sleep value from the default of 2 minutes to just 15 seconds. And then we'll go. So it's published the records. If we go over here real quick, we can see them. Oh, are they gone already? Do we only have one? What happened? Challenge. Oh, I know what happened. Sorry. Who just opened my door?
I was getting a battery.
Okay.
So I could,
hi, Wesley.
so I could charge one of the controllers because the battery is dead. So
I'm talking to some people.
I know.
Can you close the door behind you?
Yes.
Thank you. Interlude from Wesley, getting batteries for his VR controller or something like that. So the interesting thing about this order that you may or may not have noticed, that I kind of noticed, is that it only published one record, even though we had 2 names. And we saw that in here, but that there was only one ACME challenge with the gobbledygook value here for the key authorization. The reason is that Let's Encrypt specifically caches validations that you've previously done for, I think it's 30 days. And so basically, we didn't need to revalidate this name because we had just validated it in the HTTP challenge order. So the only record it needed to create was this one. That can actually, if you're testing things on your own, that can actually sort of trip you up, especially if you're testing your plugins and whatever, because you'll create an order and then you'll delete it and then you'll try again, and it won't actually publish any records. It'll just give you the cert. And so if you need to do a more valid test, you want a full test where you're having to publish the records and everything works with the plugins and everything, what you can do is you can get PA order and revoke PA authorization. If you can use force to avoid prompts, but if you don't, it prompts you for each one. It's like, oh, you want to revoke for Posh-ACME.win? Yeah. And star.posh-acme.win? Yeah. So refresh here. No records there. And we'll just do this again just for kicks. Get PA order, remove PA cert, certificate, remove PA or remove PA order, right? Know your module, Bolger. Okay, we'll run this again and it should do both records this time. There we go. Publishing challenge for that one and publishing challenge for that one. They're both the same because the wildcard lives in the same record as the root of the domain. Create our cert, download it. There we go. New cert, new thumbprint. Here's our sans. We can do the same start. No, start get PA certificate. So from the staging server again, same issued domain, same signature, same algorithm, different subject alt names, star.posh-acme.win. Zoom in there a little bit, see that. So now what? That's the gist right there. That's the basics of Posh-ACME. Like you've got your certs, you used your plugins to automate the challenges, and you could just, every 90 days you could come and redo that and take your cert file from your folder here and go use it wherever you want. Import it to Windows, use it in your services or your website or whatever. But I mean, that's manual. We're PowerShell. We can do better than that, right? And you don't want to have to come back and renew these manually every 90 days, because who wants that? That's lame. So where should we go first? Renewals or usage? Let's do renewals. So if we do get PA order -list, we can see all of the orders on this account, which is just our one. Even though we had, implementation note, FYI, if you do a new PA certificate, it keys off of the first domain in the list to determine where to put it. So we've got our posh-acme.win folder here. And so if I try and create a new cert with different names that has the same first name in the cert, it's going to overwrite the previous one. So long story short, I've got a feature request in that lets you change the folder name, so you can actually create duplicate certs with the same main domain without overwriting. It's sort of a longer term thing I'm working on, but that's why you only see one in the list right now, is because we overwrote our original HTTP challenge cert with the wildcard cert that we just got. So when you want to renew, the only command you need is submit renewal. But if we type that right now, it says, no. You just got this. You don't need to renew yet. As part of the order details, we store a renew after date, which is essentially, I think it defaults to 1/3 of the cert lifetime remaining is when it will consider itself ready for renewal. And so until that time, submit renewal will just, warn and do nothing. But with most things, you can force it. Again, though, if you're trying to test things, if you want to test your renewal and you want to test fully the renewal, you're going to have to go back and do the revoke your authorizations like you did before. We'll revoke our authorizations and we'll say submit renewal, not challenge renewal, force. And that's it. You don't need any other arguments. You could, right? Like if you have your one true new PA certificate command that always works, and you just want to put that in a script and run that in task scheduler or cron or whatever every 90 days, or technically every day, that'll work too. This is just easier. It's less to type. It's less to put in a script. It's less to deal with. because nobody likes putting their credentials in scripts and stuff. So this basically just takes all of the data that is already in your order folder, the order.json and the plugin args.json, and it basically runs new PA certificate for you. So submit renewal force verbose, and there we go. And it republished the challenges, and it is waiting for 15 seconds again. And there we go. New cert, new thumbprint. If you didn't recognize, here's our old thumbprint 7994, and this new one is 9CAD. So new cert, and every time you renew or overwrite a previous order, Posh-ACME will save the old cert in. It'll just basically rename all the old cert files as .back. And so your new ones are all the normal ones, and your old ones are here. In case you screwed up and you're like, oh crap, what did I just do? I overwrote my old cert. The old ones are still there. Don't worry, you can get them back. But again, it's ACME, and if you need the old one back, just get a new one of the old one. Like, if you messed up some names and you need the old names back or whatever, it's not that hard to just get another cert. They're unlimited, right? So let's talk about actually doing a scheduled task for renewal, because sometimes just PowerShell and scheduled tasks, historically, for me at least, is always kind of problematic. Like there's hurdles, there's gotchas with using PowerShell and scheduled tasks. So first thing to know is that generally speaking, most ACME clients do a renewal check once or twice a day. Even though that the cert that you got today, you're not really gonna actually try and renew for like 60 days or so. Most of them will have a daily run that calls whatever renewal command in that client, and the renewal command itself will say, oh, okay, this cert is not ready yet, I'm just going to ignore it. Because you can have multiple, like clients are capable of getting certs for multiple different orders. So you might have gotten one last week and one 3 weeks from now and one a month from now, and so they all have different kind of windows of when they're going to renew. And so you do want to run this at least once a day, ideally at a time that is not on a specific hour mark. Just because that's kind of what a lot of people do, and that increases the load on the CA. So it's just kind of like a polite way of scheduling your renewals. So just pick a random time. If you want, in Windows, you've even got the delay for a random delay. You can delay it for randomly up to 30 minutes or whatever. I usually put my random delay in a script, or start sleep with a get random call. But then, so at a bare minimum, all you really need is, PowerShell.exe and the submit renewal command. And that -c is the dash command argument for PowerShell.exe. It's just a short way of putting that. But that doesn't really get you logging. Good logging. I mean, I guess it can if you're logging PowerShell stuff in general, but I prefer to have a little bit more to it than that. So that's a simple option. But another way you can do it is with start transcript. It increases the complexity of the command a little bit. Let me grab this out of here so we can blow it up. It looks like for reals. Whoa, that's big. That's good though. Okay, so this is our argument for our start transcript command. We just start transcript with path to the transcript text file. we're going to do a submit renewal with the verbose, so we actually get some output that the transcript will see. I think I left force in there when I was testing some stuff. This set IIS certificate we'll get to in a little bit, but this is a deployment function from the Posh-ACME deploy module with the arguments it needs to actually apply the cert to the website. And then stop transcript, and that's it. So if we were to run this, submit renewal verbose force, yeah, we can force it. That'll be fine, right? Here, let's go into our, oh, and this was in our C cert logs folder. It's very, very apropos, right? There we see cert logs. Oh, I have an old one there. Here, let's delete that. Okay. Run. Refresh. Currently running. Completed successfully. So now in cert logs, we've got our transcript, and it's, you know, your typical PowerShell transcript file if you've used that before. And we've got all our verbose output, you know, what it did, and, you know, certificate thumbprint and stuff like that. Oh, and it did the IIS binding. That was premature. My bad. So let's get into that. Sorry, no, one more thing. If you've got complicated deployment stuff, right? Like things that you need to do with the cert that aren't really gonna fit nicely into a, you know, scheduled task actions, you know, dialogue here. Although technically, I don't know, is there a limit on this field? Like how long can this string be? Could you put a whole script in there? I don't know. But a lot of people call out to a separate script, right? Like an external PS1 file that does all the dirty work. And so I like to specifically add a little more than just calling the script so that I get nice scheduled tasks stuff. So we call our script with whatever arguments it needs. There's a no delay thing in there so we can test better. And then I redirect all my output streams to a renewstuff.log file. And I do an exit with the $ last exit code here. And all that really does is normally if you just put a you know, script file here and leave it alone, PowerShell will always exit with a success error code, regardless of if your script threw an exception or an error or whatever. And so this is just a little trick to basically take the last exit code that PowerShell gave and make sure that PowerShell uses that as its own exit code, so that if your script had a problem, you would see it in, you know, your last run result instead of always the operation completed successfully. So that's something that I like to do in a lot of my PowerShell scheduled tasks when I'm doing that stuff. And you get a, oh, well, you get a order is not recommended for renewal yet in your log. But let's look at that script. What does that script do? I don't have VS Code on this box. I apologize. Renew stuff. So we've got some standard requires version modules stuff. We've got our command binding header. There are issues with scripts calling. I've run into issues with scripts calling into script modules where the verbose flag doesn't get passed properly, and so I'm explicitly, you know, looking for the verbose flag and setting a local verbose preference to continue so that it does pass directly. I've got a little if then for my random delay in here that I can turn off with a no delay switch. I throw out a little timestamp for the log because I'm going to be appending. And then I've got this little block here that makes sure that the environment that I'm in, as far as Posh-ACME is concerned, is is the right environment, right? It's going to manually set the server, it's going to manually set our account, and it's going to manually set our order before we do submit renewal. But then here we're going to do, cert equals submit renewal, because the output of submit renewal will be empty unless it actually was able to renew the cert. And we throw it into try catch block and, throw the exception in verbose just as a, quick and dirty way of catching our errors. And then if the cert variable exists, so if submit renewal actually returns something, then go ahead and do deployment things, whatever you got to do. So as an example, I actually use a very similar script on a Linux-based HA proxy box to that basically front ends a lot of my sort of personal hobby projects as a reverse proxy. So I only need, because I'm in a colo with not a lot of public IPs, and so it's better if we can just have all the web traffic going through this one, HA proxy endpoint, and HA proxy is what terminates the SSL. And so my deployment function down here, I actually have a number of certs. So I do a get PA order list, and then for each of the orders I have, I do a submit renewal on them that goes into a certs variable here. So whichever certs happened to be renewed at the time, then we iterate through, and HA proxy specifically wants a combined key and full chain file. So we build that file out of the contents of the key file and the contents of the full chain file. And then we use a deploy folder and we save it in a specific folder, and we write the output file, and then we reload HA proxy. Like, there's not much more to this script. And that's what I use, every day on some of my own hobby stuff. There's some documentation on what it takes to do this within the HA proxy config. Binding on 443, and it has a fallback cert, and then this is the folder where it's going to look for all the other certs. And so anytime I need a new cert, I can just run, the initial new PA certificate, and then this script that is running via cron daily will pick it up and renew it from that point on, and put the output in my, ops certbot HA proxy folder. And this is sort of an example of the cron tab that I'm using to actually run that. If you're familiar with cron files. So renewals are kind of up to you. There's 101 ways to do them. They work cross-platform just as well as on Windows. And it sort of depends on, how many certs you have and how many certs you have and how detailed you want to log the process, whether you want to be notified if the things fail, and again, it's PowerShell, right? We are running out of time, aren't we? Okay, last thing. Where was I? Let me deploy just a little bit. So we've got our cert, and built into Posh-ACME, there is a explicit install PA certificate function. Let's do that. This is kind of a legacy thing from 3x. It provides a little more control than you can get using the option that exists in new PA certificate. New PA certificate has a install parameter, and all that does is when it gets the cert, it puts it in the local computer's personal store, which we already did because I ran that one transcript scheduled task. And so if you want more control over where the cert ends up, like if you want it to put it in a different store, not the local computer or not the personal store for whatever reason, you can use install PA certificate to do that as well. And you can just do that with, get PA certificate, install PA certificate, store location, whatever, and that'll do it. The trick is, so the install flag on new PA certificate, and depending on where you're trying to put it with install PA certificate, you may need elevated permissions on the box. Everything we've done up to this point doesn't require admin permissions. So particularly with DNS plugins, HTTP can, depending on what plugin you're using, if you're using the self-host plugin in particular, that can require some finagling with permissions and NetSH and URL ACLs and stuff like that because of how it's using http.sys under the hood. But the guide details those the guide for the plugin details those permissions and how to set them up if you need to run it as a non-admin user. But just be aware that when you start getting into Windows cert stores and stuff, that's when you start crossing the threshold into potentially needing to be admin on the box in order to do what you want to do. So the Posh-ACME deploy functions, let's look at those. Git command module Posh-ACME deploy. So there's only a handful. I don't use these a ton, to be quite honest, but I feel like these were the ones that I felt like were low-hanging fruit and that would be relatively common in a Windows environment. They're definitely all Windows specific right now. I don't have any cross-platform deployment plugins because there's not, I don't know. I don't like dealing with deployment. That's usually somebody else's job. But we've got, set WinRM certificate, set RDSH certificate, RD Gateway, IIS FTP, IIS in general, and Exchange. This was actually submitted by somebody else. So I've never run Exchange in my life, thankfully, and I don't intend to start. So if this doesn't work for you, submit an issue and we'll tag the person who wrote it and see if they can fix it. But the IIS one is what we've got, so let's play with that. Let's delete this for now, and let's fix our binding because it probably got added when we did that thing earlier. Move. Okay, so refresher, we've only got HTTP bindings right now on our website, and we've got no certificate in the store. So what do? We've got our order and we've got our certificate. But let's look at what we can do with set IIS certificate. So it takes a bunch of stuff like the cert thumbprint or a PFX file path and the password to the PFX file. But coincidentally or not, all of these properties are part of the output of get PA certificate. So what you can do is get PA certificate and then just pipe it to set IIS certificate and then only include the IIS specific properties that you need. So we've got site name, we've got port, we've got IP address, which is the bind IP address, like what here, like in this dropdown, if it's unassigned or a specific IP. And we've got whether you want to use a host header, whether you require SNI, and whether you want to remove the old cert, which is a big one for me because I hate having, 10 bajillion certs that are all the same name here that are expired and things like that. So we can do set IIS certificate and our site name is just my site. And our port, so we're going to do it on 8443 because that's what I have exposed to the outside via the NAT rule. 8443 and remove old cert, and that's it. And verbose. So it does everything it needs to do under the hood, and we've got our HTTPS binding on a non-specific IP with no SNI or host header, and it's using the cert that we got from Let's Encrypt. And that ends up in here. If we just refreshed, and we're good to go. This might also require admin, now that I think about it. Although I'm not sure. I don't actually deal with IIS that much. And if we wanted to, like, we could do it on another port as well, like on the regular 443 port, so we can see it from this box. And then do this. And we get a browser warning because we're still on the staging server and this isn't a real cert and we don't trust it yet. Actually, you know, we're at the end here, right? We're almost done. Let's get a real one. What the hell? Let's do this. So we have in our history our new PA certificate. There we go. Nope, that's the old one. Where is it? Come on now. There it is. Here's our wildcard cert for Cloudflare that we know works against the staging server. What do we do when we want to go to production? We've done testing. We know everything works. Here's what we do. Comment that out. That PA server, LE prod. We don't have an account yet. So production and staging have their own account systems. So if we do get PA account here, PA account. Nope, get PA account. Can I type? Yes. There's no account here yet. So we would also have to do new PA account. Again, they're kind of disposable, and accept the TOS and put a contact if we wanted to or not. And then we can just rerun the exact same command and go. So now, a certificate. Now we've got the real deal, issued by R3, which is the name of the real production intermediate CA. We can see our cert path goes all the way up to DST root CA X3. Again, chain issues we didn't have time to go into. Whoops. We've got same algorithm, same public key size, and we've got our subject alt names. And this is a totally legit cert I can put wherever, and they will believe that I am Posh-ACME.win. So similarly, we can do get PA certificate. We can do our same get PA certificate call, our same set IIS certificate call with our remove old cert, FYI, because right now, where's my thing? Right now, we only have the one from staging. And if we do that on 443, refresh here. Now we've got the new R3 one. And if we do this, we've got a nice happy lock icon with no cert warning. And it's secure, and Chrome, Edgium, whatever you want to call this, is happy. And we're all good. And technically, if we want to make it external, we got to do this too. Just because my funky NAT setup. And that's about it. Like, I think that's all I've got. Like, and we're kind of out of time, so I'm gonna stop blathering and see if anybody's got any questions before we wrap up.
I think I'll speak for I say if that's it.
Sorry, a little bit of fire hose there. I get excited. been a pleasure. This was fun. And yeah, I've got one more slide. Not that it really matters, but here I've got more information. If yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Reddit, I'm in the Let's Encrypt community forums all the time. If you've got questions, just how to do stuff, or you got problems with the module or anything, just reach out. However, I'm open to questions and help, and I love helping people. So yeah, feel free to reach out whenever and however.